and welcome to our boating industry eNews. Our aim is to bring you interviews and panel discussions on issues across the boating sector. Today we catch up with Alex Barrell, Acting Executive Director Maritime Transport for New South Wales, and Adam Smith, Chair, BIA Council in New South Wales. Welcome to both of you.
Hi. Morning, Neil.
Sure. Hey, it's hard to believe it was only 12 March when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. Man, plenty has happened, but how would you summarise the impact on boating in New South Wales in particular up to this point? And perhaps, Alex, you go first.
Yeah, look, Neil, it is surprising that it was the 12th of March. A lot has happened since then. I was only reflecting yesterday at work, 4 months into it from a maritime perspective and the challenges that we've faced over the last 4 months to get to where we are. I think, as you would be well aware of, we struggled very early in the pandemic to get some clear clarity around what it meant for boating in New South Wales. I mean, it was very clear the direction that was coming out from the Premier and New South Wales government, the intent of the restrictions that were put in, were really designed for right across New South Wales communities, some real restrictions to stop the spread of COVID. Where it got difficult for us was really getting into the weeds around what it meant for boating. And, I think it just showed the benefits, one, of a strong industry, and two, the partnership between industry and government to eventually get to a position that allowed boating to happen. There were some sensible amendments made to the health order. But it was really a challenging time. It was a challenging time for maritime and transport. One, to be able to communicate really effectively with the customer base, and two, we acknowledge the frustration that it must have been for some of the boaters out there to really understand what it meant for boating in New South Wales.
Yeah, I mean, Alex, someone cooked up the hashtag early in the piece, "We're in this together." It couldn't have been more accurate because, and hats off to, Maritime in New South Wales and yourself. It did seem painful at times, but we got a lot of positive outcomes on the journey through as the gates of restrictions were opening up. So certainly appreciate that. And Adam, what about from your perspective for the industry?
Yeah, so look, my own part of the industry in training, we pretty much closed our doors on the 23rd of March when all of our venues closed, like being licensed premises. That gave us a good opportunity to do a set and work out what we were doing and how we could potentially change it. It forced us to make to think about things and to work out, well, do we really have to do it that way? Can we do it better another way? How can we sort of adapt to what we've got out there? Once we knew exactly where we were in relation to those public health orders as being education providers, we then had to work out how we could get into doing what we do and comply with the other physical distancing and hygiene requirements. And we've just been plodding along doing small group courses where we can and getting people out in the water. There's definitely appetite for boating out there at the moment, which is great.
And Adam, what about the current challenges for industry? Not just your own business, which is, as you say, had to shut down for a while, but just generally, what are you getting from your network in New South Wales?
Yeah, so we went and visited a bunch of different dealers mainly. Started last month. And there's a lot of people that are looking at it differently and trying to work out how they can maintain a connection with either people that are looking to get into boating as an activity, or looking for an activity that's going to fill a gap that might have been filled by something else as travel or something like that. We found that they've looked at different ways of engaging with their potential customers and working out how they can get the message out there. Things like boat shows, like the big Sydney Boat Show, which is supposed to be the end of this month, isn't going to happen. Rose Hill didn't happen. There are options out there for what we can possibly on how the rules and regulations about public gatherings and what have you change. But again, a lot of dealers have been looking at different ways to engage with their audience, which has been really interesting to see.
And Alex, what about as the regulator? What are your priorities at the moment?
Oh, look, I think what it was really called out early is that, well, many parts of government just look at boating as quite a simple pastime. What we've really found out through it, and what we've known for a long time, is how complex it is and how broad. So, it's not just mum and dad and a small tinny. You've got yachties, you've got sporting clubs, you've got commercial enterprises, and, you would have seen, Neil, particularly the commercial sector on Sydney Harbour, really tied up their whole fleet back in March. So, you know, priority for us at the moment, I know the BIA has been really heavily involved in discussions, is about how we can really provide some meaningful rental relief to certainly a lot of our commercial tenancies, particularly in Sydney, but right across the state, to make sure that there is some meaningful help. So that's still really a key priority for us. And obviously the other parties, we have noticed that, you know, particularly during the shutdown period, boating was a real heavy pastime for people that they were out and about. A lot of people were working from home, and I think, right or wrongly, we did see an increase in numbers, particularly up the far north coast. And you know, that also coincided with, unfortunately, a fairly tragic year on our waterways in New South Wales in terms of fatalities. So it's about really making sure for us at the moment that we've got our safety resources in the right place, and also, as Adam touched on, trying to find new ways to communicate with our customer, because we have had to shift our focus. You know, we don't have the ability to get into schools. We don't have the ability to get into fishing clubs and the like at the moment. So really trying to understand how we actually engage with the customer. One, around keeping them up to date around what it means from the public health perspective, but just our general safety messaging. And that's something, as we're only, 2 months, 3 months away now from the start of the next boating season, that we really take some lessons potentially around our communication over the last 12 months and see how we can be more engaged with the boater.
Yeah, Alex, it's certainly good to hear that New South Wales was able to get over the line in terms of that rent relief for the marinas, and particularly their subtenants, and a number of those being the commercial, the charter fleets, who obviously feeling the full force of the lockdown, as anyone in tourism was. So that's good to hear that got over the line. And you referred to a couple of things that you're doing differently. I guess that's one question I was going to ask, that about COVID-19 has forced us all to do things differently, some significant changes in the way we do business and connect. Are there any lessons that you're going to actually pick up and take forward, into the future? And I'm thinking maybe Adam first, in terms of any lessons out of COVID-19.
Yeah, look, so first of all, having the break allowed me the opportunity to reevaluate our own, our training materials and our process that we go through. And we looked at different ways to how we can potentially deliver training to people, whether it's online or in smaller groups, or changing the format up. I think that business as a whole and the industry is starting to look at engaging more with online and interactive and sort of a distance method of engaging with customers. Things like the boat show is such a decision-making point for a lot of people that are new to getting into boating. It's really hard to take that out of the equation for a lot of dealers. But they're looking at other ways to engage with people, which is really good. But in my own area here, we've just looked at different ways to deliver training, how we can structure it, how we can get it out to people, so that people are a little more comfortable with getting into a course, for example, like not necessarily being stuck in a room for 3.5 hours with 35 other people breathing all over them for that time. So there's options out there which we're looking at, which is good.
And Alex, what about from the regulator? Anything you're picking up and likely to take forward? For example, the use of video meetings, as an example.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I mean, from a whole internal Transport for New South Wales perspective, around our own staff and how we actually work and doing things different, is something that we're really looking at the moment. But from a customer perspective and from the boaters, I think what it's really shown to us, and yes, it's a lesson, but it's also something we knew pre-COVID, is that as I said at the start, you can't do it alone. So as a regulator, you can't influence things solely just by being the regulator. You've got to work with industry, and you've got to work with your partners. It really shows that collaboration and where it pays off, to influence decision makers within government. And I think, as I touched on earlier, that's something we found quite complex at the start, where traditionally pre-COVID, transport is responsible for, and Maritime is for, the regulation on waterways. And for the first time that I'm certainly aware of, and I've been doing this for over 25 years in a regulatory space on the water, we weren't the one making the rules around boating on the water. We weren't the ones, and that was complex. So one, it was complex in terms of engaging government, and also, as I said earlier, it was about how do we then engage the customer. So I think government will debrief this as every state government jurisdiction and the Commonwealth will do after COVID. And I think there's lessons to be learnt around making sure that the regulators within their own governments have the ability to influence certain policy settings. And I think we got there in the end within the maritime space, but there's still some lessons to take out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things. Government is a big machine, and sometimes, for the people trying to get in there and work with government, it can be pretty hard. But I think that you're right in a sense. The fact that the ability to connect with multiple agencies at once on some of these issues with good speed, most of the time anyway, was a bit of a breakthrough in some ways. But hey,
And I think what was really good,
yeah.
Neil, sorry, I think what was really good was it just showed that, particularly from an industry perspective, so whether it was the BIA or your colleagues in the commercial sector or just individual operators, I know the training providers, Adams, were the same, that they really wanted to take a responsible approach for it. And, the lobbying that took place of us as a regulator or more broadly in government wasn't about making things unsafe. It was actually really around industry and the customer working with government to come up with sort of some safe outcomes so that they could, one, see their industry continue, but see it done safely. And that was a real positive that I took out of initially the first couple of months.
Hey, Adam, you mentioned the Sydney Boat Show before. What do you think is the chance of seeing the Sydney Boat Show back in force next year?
And yes, hopefully looking to put something fantastic on in Sydney next year, depending on rules and regs. And
Alex, you got any views about? I know it's a long way away, and anything could happen, but you'd have to say it's looking reasonable chance, especially if they can put 10,000 people in a footy stadium, right?
Yeah, look, I think optimistically we'd all love to see it. It's great for industry, it's great for the sales of boats and all of that, but it's a great opportunity for us to engage with our customer too. We invest a lot of time and effort into making sure that we reach out to our customer through the boat shows. So optimistically, we would love to see it back. And I think, if we hopefully continue on the same trajectory and we do see things, larger gathering opening up, then that will be extended to the boat shows. But I think what we've learned in the last 2 weeks, particularly what's happening in Victoria, is that really we're only 1 week away from, sliding back down the slippery slide. So I think, we've just got to stay focused on the short term, continue to do the right thing, and hopefully, come August next year, the shackles are released and we're back to running a really great boat show with the BIA.
Yeah, I think, Alex, that just goes to reinforce the need to, because it's a strange environment, because once you get these restrictions lifted and you can go out and do things, and I totally get it, people completely think, oh, that's just normal. We're going back to normal. And so that social distancing starts to fall away, and that hand washing and all those other bits need to start to fall away, not by design, it's just the human behaviour, the way that works, which reinforces the need to be COVID safe across the industry. And no doubt you've got your own COVID safe plans within the regulator, but the industry, you should know, is working hard to promote COVID safe practice across the industry, at the retailer point, wherever customers are being engaged, like the training providers, and also the commercial vessel fleets and marinas and so on, because it's a long way before it's well over. So I guess that we need to be, supporting each other, both the regulator and the industry, in terms of that messaging. And that is something we need to keep working on for probably months to come. Alex, with I guess just looking forward over the next 2 to 3 years, what do you see as the key priority boating issues in New South Wales from your point of view?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's 3 things, and well, Neil, that we pride ourselves, I guess, on 3 pillars around the environment, access and amenity for the boater, and safety being number 1. So I touched earlier before, unfortunately, been a pretty tragic year, and we're just in the process at the moment of developing the next marine safety plan, and that'll focus really heavily, potentially on some of the lessons learned in the last 12 months. We were tracking really well up until the last financial year. So that's obviously a priority for government to push out the next marine safety plan. I think the other part is really looking around how we do actually invest, boaters' money wisely, particularly around that access piece. And we're just about to release Boating Now round 3. And there's some great initiatives in there, in local government areas, particularly out in the regional area. So I think that's a real priority for us, to make sure that we're putting the infrastructure where it's needed. We're making our waterways really safe, but accessible to the boater. And noting that I'm a real strong believer that our customer base has gone a lot broader now than just boating. There's so much passive craft. We can't put our head in the sand and say that we can't. We've got to work with the swimming groups and all those types of all waterway users. And I think that's a real critical part to take us forward. And if you look what's happening in transport, particularly around how we're evolving as a cluster to make sure that we're looking at placemaking, and Maritime's not immune to that. So, it is about how we invest in local areas and regions, not just about water, but whole precinct activations to really make sure that they're just really great places to be. And, from our perspective, safe waterways, easy to get to, other priorities.
Yeah, I think that, to New South Wales credit, coming out of that organisation that is, transport, where Maritime's now part of it, has done an awesome job over the last couple of years to deal with that issue of infrastructure, the new and improved infrastructure across New South Wales, particularly regional. And I think the shift to moving to that idea of a place, creating destinations, that's a truly good project and initiative. And the industry's 100% behind that idea, and particularly, as you say, Alex, that it's not just the runabout is the issue or the white cruiser. It's so much more than that. The boom in paddling is significant, and all of our intel that we're getting flooding in right now is there's a complete lift in people who are getting back into boating, whether it's powerboating, sailing, or paddling. But there are also a whole raft of people who are coming in new. So that's it could be quite a challenging, a fantastic opportunity to help people enjoy getting out on our waterways and do it safely. Adam, what about yourself from the industry point of view about the key issues in boating in New South Wales?
Yeah, no, I had a thought about three important things. Definitely infrastructure is an important part of the equation there, making sure that boat ramps and other paddlecraft facilities are funded and maintained, and making sure that I think that that they're all there for people to use, which is really important. Storage options, I think, is another thing that we really want to look at, and how people's living arrangements are changing rapidly with a lot more high density accommodation going on. So they don't have a quarter-acre block to store a boat out down the driveway, down the side, or out in the front yard. And councils, getting tough in air quotes on trailers. There's got to be somewhere where we can put them all. So I think it's really important to look for storage options for boats, for people to be able to get the whole picture and the complete ownership experience of boating. And another important thing for us is training pathways for the industry, for big, trainees, for apprentices, traineeships, especially in rural and regional areas like outside of the metros. It seems to be really hard for apprentices in marine mechanics or shipwrights to find access to when they're not in a metro area. So definitely we need to work on developing those training pathways with TAFE and offering fantastic, making it desirable for people to come and for kids leaving school to come and take on a trade in the boating industry. I know they do it really well in Queensland. Something in New South Wales we're looking at trying to do better. Because we need to make sure that once people have bought these boats and paddlecrafts and everything, there's people there to service them and repair them and maintain them and update them and to keep everyone safe on them too. So they're, off the top of my head, there were three things that I thought of that I think that are key boating issues for us.
Hey, Alex, just to pick up something you mentioned before about the way government's working. So do you think that, the liaison between the maritime agencies, for example, and organisations, let's just say the Port Authority, for example, national parks have got to roll out on our waterways as well, environment, Marine Rescue New South Wales, within transport itself. Do you think that there's a chance that it significantly improves in the way the interrelationships between those organisations that have a genuine benefit to the public? Do you think that is a potential lift in that?
Yeah, look, I think it has to be, Neil. So I think, we can't, COVID's been a classic example. As I said earlier, you can't go it alone. I think to really get those placemaking outcomes, you've got to do it with your partners in government, your partners in industry. So, already we're working a lot closer, I think, with DPI and Crown Lands. We're working heavily with local councils, and that's some of that benefit where we can leverage off the broader transport space where they've got really strong relationships in, as I say, regional areas, and there's a big focus on the regions around leveraging off some of that. And it might be, that Maritime aren't necessarily the lead in a lot of these. They provide the knowledge and the expertise to get projects across the line, but more broadly, we're leveraging off the size and the expertise within transport to really deliver these projects. And I think, the intent of government, where we've got a lot of those coastal harbours and the Crown Land assets now coming under the management of Maritime, under transport, again is a great benefit, I think, to the end user, because we'll be able to provide some consistency across not only how we manage the waterways from vessel storage, like Adam touched on, but we can now translate that across into some of those coastal harbours. And I think at the end that just provides so much greater clarity for the customer.
Yeah, no, look, you're doing some good stuff in New South Wales, there's no doubt. And if you can keep doing that better year on year, then that's a good thing. Hey,
Yeah.
just to wrap this up a little bit, and Alex, to you, I'm doing this each week with these these interviews to ask the people on, what actually got you into boating in the first place? What drives the interest and the passion?
So I've got a bit of a funny story, or it's not funny, but I was brought up on the back of a surf boat. So my dad was a surf boat sweep from the age of I was probably about 3, and used to sit at his feet as he trained his crews around Sydney Harbour.
Life jacket on?
Life jacket. Well, it's probably. I'm going to stick my hand up and be honest. This is back in the late 70s, so it wasn't really time for life jackets. And I learnt to swim from a pretty young age. And yeah, look, I've just grown up around the water. My background, Neil. I spent 20 years in the police force, and 20 of those, 25 in the police force. 20 of those were on the water, whether as a diver or as a boat operator. And that just got my passion going. I've got an real strong interest in safety, but most importantly, I just love the water. It's such a great place to be, and I consider myself very blessed to have pretty much had my whole career working around the water and the commercial sector of boating. It's been fantastic.
No, good on you. Adam?
Yeah, look, so I thought about it, and essentially I got involved in sailing, I think as cheap babysitting for my mum when I was young. I ended up joining the local Sea Scouts down at Balmoral and got involved with sailing there, and it was basically somewhere for me to go every school holidays and weekends, and it kept me out of trouble mostly. And then that kind of developed into sailing skiffs over at Manly, and then sailing keelboats and doing ocean racing, and it all kind of went on from there, really. But it was all sort of the seed was planted when I was about 8 in Sea Scouts.
Okay, guys. Look, thank you so much. I'm mindful of taking up your precious time. Thanks again to both of you, and stay COVID safe.
Good on you, Neil, and thanks for the support of the BIA through COVID.